Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem and welcome back to today's Daf Yomi Kesubos Nun Gimel. We are 17 lines from the top of the Amud. In yesterday's Daf, we discussed in great length the concept of Kesubos Benin Dichron. So briefly, what it means is as follows. We want a father to offer a generous dowry to facilitate his daughter's marriage. In fact, we have a pasuk which encourages us to do that, right? We want to get that father involved. And therefore the Chachamim made a takana. You see, this fellow might be hesitant to and give it all away to his daughter, for after her passing, it goes over to the husband. After whose passing, it goes over to his kids. Let's say there are two sets of kids, his and hers, and therefore they enacted a takana. You know where all this money goes to? All this property, all this nidunya, all this dowry, it goes to her boys. And the rest, whatever's left over, all the siblings divide equally. But her kesuba material stays in the family. And this will encourage a fellow to offer a generous offering upon his daughter's marriage, knowing that it's going to stay, in-house eventually. That's Kesubos Benin Dichron. Here comes an interesting question. Bo'oimine, 17 lines from the top. Bo'oimine, Rav Yemar Saba, he asked the question, Meirav Nachman, Mochrok Subaso Lebal. There's a concept of selling the Kesuba rights. You can actually sell a Kesuba. She sold it to none other than her own husband, which basically means you take over the rights to accept the Kesuba payat when and if that time arrives upon divorce or death. She's meant to get the Kesuba. She's selling that right to him. So now it stays, it stays with him. There's no payout. It stays with him and his kids. So she sold the Kesuba to him. Of course, you don't make that much on this type of deal because, after all, it's just a token amount, because if she would die, in any case, he would be Yerush the Kesuba. So it's almost like a 50-50 proposition here. He's just buying the chances. He's giving her a token amount on the chance that there would be a payout. I am acquiring the rights to that payout. But the question remains, what happens to Kesubos Benin Dichron upon his passing? Does that also get cancelled, so to speak? Does that get transferred to the husband? Now he assumes rights to all the properties and all the dowries as though she wasn't involved, as though there was no arrangement for it to go to her kids. It's totally his now. She sort of gave it all away to him. Or perhaps that aspect of the Kesuba arrangement still remains. Yesh lo Kesubos Benin Dichron? Does she still have that right, that privilege, that power of Kesubos Benin Dichron? Oy ein lo Kesubos Benin Dichron? Or perhaps by selling her Kesuba to her husband, she's pretty much relinquishing any claims to any aspect of the Kesuba arrangement, including Kesubos Benin Dichron. Amalei Rabbi responds, why pick something so uncommon? Selling a Kesuba to her husband. Pick something which is perhaps more common. Let's say she just gave away. She forgave the Kesuba, claim to her husband. That's a more common occurrence. The same question would apply. To what extent has she given up her claim? Amar lei, so Rav Yemar Saba explained to him why he chose to present the question in a context of sale as opposed to mechila. Hashta meicheres kemeboili. You see, there is an extra chiddush. Why would she sell? Apparently, she was desperate for funds. And still, I had that question. Look, by selling where it's an act of desperation, I still presented this question. Does she lose the entire zechus or not? Although there's room to think that she does not lose the rights. Remember, because there's room to say Zuzi Ansur, she was forced, she was compelled by destitution. She had to sell out of desperation. Right? So in that case, you would think perhaps she doesn't lose the rights to the rest of the ksuba, to the ksubas b'nin dichran. The amina, because I figure command kemachula, it's as though she was strapped and hit mea uchli, 100 whips, b'uchla. Rashi says this is a special whip that has a metal weight at the end. Pretty painful experience. Basically, she was compelled to do this. She did it out of desperation. Still, there's room to think that, she gave up her rights. It goes without saying that if she simply just gives up the ksuba to her husband, of course, there's strong reason to believe that it's all been given up and all relinquished. So I was trying to bring out a greater novelty, a greater chiddush, even by her selling the ksuba, which is an act of desperation, an act of oinus. Perhaps by doing so she gives up all rights. That was my question. Amar Rava. Rava declares as follows. I'm going to compartmentalize the cases. It depends on the exact circumstance. Pshitali, it's clear to me. She sells a ksuba to other people, so now they have the right to collect upon divorce or death of her husband. In that case, she had not given up the rights of her children to collect the ksubas b'nin dichran. Why? My time, why? Zuzi saw she was compelled by financial straits that she was in. She didn't mean to give up all her ksuba rights. The actual, the mana, the masayim, the basic payment, they have a right to collect that, but she didn't mean to give everything up and to cancel the entire arrangement. That's clear to me, says Rabbi. You sell it to other people, you still retain ksubas b'nin dichran. Mechelek ksubas lebalav, she totally gives it up to her husband for free. Doesn't sound like she's too interested in the ksuba. Ein la ksubas b'nin dichran, she totally gives up all rights. My time, why? Achuli achilta, she just gave it up. She forgave the entire obligation. The question is, by Rava, moicheres ksubas lebala. So Rava asks, what about a middle case? She sold the ksuba to her husband. How do we treat this? Is it as though? Is it compared to the sale to others? In which case we say, look, she was desperate, she sold, but she didn't mean to cancel the entire arrangement. That's one way to look at it. Or should we treat it as though she forgave her husband? Because basically it's in his hands. He's in possession of everything. The fact that she's just giving it to him, true, by way of sale, but the fact that she's sort of allowing him to totally acquire everything in there, including ksubas b'nin dichran. So that's the question. Selling to your husband, what happens? Basa de baya hadar pashta. After he presented the question, he concluded with clarity that mecheres ksubas labala kemecheres lacherem dami, selling to a husband is like selling to a stranger, in which case the ksubas b'nin dichran remains unaffected. Ma'asav Ravi Dibar Avin, I have a question on you. You're telling me that the fact that she sold it, it's only Zuzi Ansur, she was compelled. She was desperate. She wasn't trying to just, cancel the entire arrangement. Is that so? Masir Ridi Bar Abin have a kasha. This is the Mishnah in Yevamis. You may recall the story there where she was told that her husband passed away, her husband left town. She got word about his passing. She married somebody else. He came back. Apparently, she didn't do a good job investigating before she actually went ahead and married. We apply all kinds of penalties. Mesa, if this woman passes away, Ein Yoshin Shalzeh, so the inheritors, the descendants of the first husband, Ve'in Yershin Shazeh, nor of the second husband, Yershin Ksubasa, none of them can have access to her ksuba money. That's the Mishnah. Avinu, but we had a kasha. What do you mean? Ksuba? Ksuba Samayavita. Why are we discussing her ksuba? She, in any case, is not entitled to collect any payment, any ksuba payout from any husband. It's a knas. You should have done better homework before you married. So what do you mean the Yershin are not yours to ksuba? What ksuba is there to speak of? Vamar Papa, you're right. We're not speaking about the standard ksuba payout, which she doesn't get regardless. Rather, ksubas b'nin dichron. Oh, we're speaking about the special ksubas b'nin dichron where her sons are meant to have access to her, dowry material, etc. So the Mishnah tells us, no, we totally canceled that arrangement. The sons, her sons, whether from the first husband or the second husband, they cannot utilize, they cannot activate the ksubas b'nin dichron arrangement. Why? Va'amai, why would you say that? Just as in our Gemara, we contend that if she commits an act out of desperation, i.e., selling her ksuba, it doesn't have that much weight or significance. We don't just nullify the entire ksuba arrangement. She was forced to sell, she was desperate. Here as well. She needed to get married. She was compelled. It was just an overwhelming emotional need to remarry. She wasn't willingly, antagonizing the system. Here as well. Let us attribute it to the Yetzer Hara who just forced into this new marriage prematurely. Why would you take away the ksubas b'nin dichron? Big difference. Hasam knasahu, the kansur rabbanan. True, it's a special knas. It wouldn't just happen by itself. There's a special knas. The fact that she did not do diligence before she married, that triggers a knas, which includes canceling the entire ksuba arrangement, including the ksubas b'nin dichron aspect of that ksuba. Yosef Ravin Bar Chanina, he was sitting Kamei Rav Chizda in front of Rav Chizda. Yosef Kama, he was saying over Mishmei de Rabbi Lazar, Mechelas ksubasa lebala ein lo mezainas. Here comes a chiddush. A woman freely, willingly gave up her ksuba to her husband. That's it. I have no more ksuba claims against you. And he passed away. Typically, an almana supports herself from her departed husband's assets, right? In this case, she cannot collect mezainas from his assets. Why? Let's remember, mezainas is an element of the ksuba obligation. Well, guess what? There's no ksuba in this case. She gave it all up during his lifetime. That was the halach. Amar lei, so Rav Chizda, it seems Rav Chizda was the one who responded. He didn't like this halach. He says, Ilavdika amrsli, mishmei, de gaver rabba. If not for the fact that you were quoting this in the name of a great man, Rabbi Lazar, I would have totally negated this idea. You're going to deprive the almana of her mezainis just because she was so nice to her husband and gave away her ksuba. You're going to deprive her of mezainis. That's hakaras hatoiv. Is that a proper show of appreciation? Havaminilach, I would have told you, it's totally out of line. As the pasuk in Mishlei says, Meishev ra tachas teva. If one responds with ra in exchange for a favor that he receives, lo tamash ru'ami beisai, his house should be always saturated with ra. Meaning, she was a nice woman. She gave away the ksuba to her husband. Why are you taking away her mezainis? It's totally out of place and inappropriate. Continues the Gemara. Here comes a new question. A fellow was engaged, an arusa, who passed away. Does he have to look after her kivura, just as a husband would have to take care of his wife's burial, in exchange of the ksuba, the nedunya, the dowry that he receives from her, as we discussed the other day? What are they're really engaged? I was speaking about really engaged, not like today, but a real kedushin. They're engaged. Does the halacha of kivura apply? Yosef Rav Nachman. So Rav Nachman was sitting Ve'ula together with Ula Ve'avimi bar of Papi. They were sitting together. Ve'yosef Rav Chia bar Ami Gabai. Rav Chia was sitting next to them. Sahu Gavra. Comes along this fellow, the Shchiva Arusasai, whose Arusa had just passed away. He was engaged to her, she passed away. Question: do I have to pay for the kvura expenses? Amrile, so they told him, sure. Zil kavar, either you bury, or you have ksuvasa, or give the ksuba that you owe her. The 100, the 200, whatever it is. It's tit for tat. Right now you're sort of being yorish that, you're saving that payment. You're sort of being yorish the ksuba payout from her. Instead of paying her, now you keep it. Instead of that, you have to pay for the kvura. Amar Lahu Rav Chia, so Rav Chia disagreed. We have a Mishnah, Tanina. Ishta Yarusa. To his wife and Arusa, loy oinen. If he's a kohen, on the day of Misa, he's not considered an oinen who typically cannot eat karbanis. V'loy metamila, nor is he allowed to take care of her personally at that point, because he's a kohen. She's not really his wife, which would allow that. V'chein he, the same on her side. If he passes away on her, lo yoinanes, she's not considered an oinen. V'loy metamaloi, nor does she have to take care of his kvura. Meisa, she passes away. Eino yersha, he doesn't get the dowry. We had this a couple of days ago, right? That only happens, he only has the schus to access her dowry once they marry, or at least once they're on the way to marriage. But at this early premature point, he doesn't have access to her, assets. Meisu, if he passes away, goyva ksuvasa, she's entitled to the ksuba payout. Oh, tama de meisu, only because he passed away, so she can collect that payout. Ha meisahi, but if she passes away, ein lo ksuba. In that case, we say the ksuba obligations are not yet activated. They don't kick in. They're not triggered by her death, which basically means that he doesn't have to bury her, because kibura is tachas ksuba. He buries because he gets in the dunya. At this early point, he doesn't have access to her dowry. They're only engaged, so he's not chayav to bury her. My timer, why? What does the Gemara mean, my timer? So Rashi explains, sure, I can't access her dowry material, but I've just saved 200 zuz. Why isn't that enough to obligate kibura? The answer is, he didn't get anything from her. He saved. A penny saved is a penny earned, but it's all theoretics. Bottom line is, she didn't really give him anything. He didn't really get anything from her, so he doesn't have to respond by burying. My time, because if you take a look at the text of the ksuba, you'll see it doesn't apply in this case. What does the ksuba say? After the man dies, after he divorces, which will allow you to remarry, titli mashakasav licha, you'll take what's deserving, what's coming to you. You'll get your ksuba payout. But if she dies, at this early point, she never really got anything. Sure, he saved that money, but it wasn't really a chiyuv that had been, activated. It wasn't really actualized yet. There's no shibud yet. I mean, if he would die, she would get the ksuba, right? She would get the payout. But the fact that he saved on that payout, it's not considered having gotten anything from her. That's what it seems from the Gemara. Right? So if they were married, so then he does get a lot. What does he get? The nadunya, the dowry, material. But during Erusin, that's not applicable. He's not getting that, and he's not really getting the ksuba payout. He's just saving on that. Therefore, he doesn't have the parallel obligation, which is to look after the kvura. Kiyasa Ravin, likewise, when Ravin came from Eretz Yisrael, Amr Rish Lakish, he quoted Rish Lakish, as per the same halacha. Arusa Shemesa, Ein Lo Kesuba, and Arusa passes away, she has no din kesuba, meaning he's not chayiv to bury. Amr la Abayis, Abayi told them, Zilu imrule, go tell Ravin, we already know this halacha. Shkilo tivusach, go take your favor, so to speak. You thought you came up with a novelty. Take that v'shadra chizri, go toss it out on the thorns. Basically, what he's saying is, we already know this halacha that an arusa is not entitled. Kvar tirguma Rav Aisha l'shmai to bebabel, because Rav Aisha in Babel already, put forth and elaborated on this halacha that indeed there is no kvura during erusin. Okay, back to the Mishnah, where a daughter is entitled to support herself using her departed father's assets. Until when? Until she grows an adult or until she gets married. Rav Tani, so Rav's version of the nusach of the Mishnah was, until when does she have that right? Adati lakchan leguvran, until they're taken by men, until they marry. At which point the privilege of mezainis terminates. That's Rav. V'Levi Tani, Levi had a different girsa. Adati bagra, until they become a begeris, an adult. Because at that point, even if father was alive, a begeris is sort of out of his possession, out of his rishus, out of his domain. And therefore, it's probable, it's logical that he no longer has to look after her mezainis. Asks the Gemara, so we have machlekes. L'Rav afagav de bagar. See, Rav said until marriage, which sounds like afagav de bagar. Even if she's already a begeris, she's still entitled to mezainis. Hard to believe. She's already an adult. She's out of her father's domain. Or the Levi, and Levi who said begeris is what triggers the shift. Afagav de insiv, which almost sounds like, but marriage doesn't do that. Of course it does. Ella, rather, this is what they meant. Of course, one or the other. Bagar, if she's a begeris, v'lo insif, without marriage, or insif, she's married, v'lo bagar, without begeris, of course, she loses her rights. To kuli amale pligi, of course, all agree. All agree. There's no mezainis. So what's the question? Ki pligi barusa, v'lo bagar. Let's say she's not a begeris. She's still a ktana, a nara, but she's already engaged. What happens by engagement? She's like sort of partially still by the father and already halfway out, connected to the husband. So that's the machlekes. Rav says, tilukchan legovern. Engagement is enough. Lekicha, engagement that terminates the schus of mezainis. She already identifies with her husband. And Levi maintains no. You need to actually marry, either a begeris or actually marry, but arusa doesn't have the same effect. V'chein Tani Levi b'masnisa. In fact, Levi had his own brises. Rashi explains he had 6 sidarim, like we have the Mishnayos, Shisha Sidrei Mishnah. He had 6 sidarim of brises. So in his brises, he had this lashon that the daughter is entitled to mezainis ad diti bagran, until they become a begeris. V'yamti zimneyon de insiban, and the wedding date arrives. Tarti, you need both conditions? No. Ella, rather, oite bagran, either a begeris, so an adult is no longer going to access her departed father's estate, or the wedding date has arrived. Yamati zimneyon lisnaba, the time for the marriage arrives. But just plain engagement, that wouldn't do the trick. Kitanoi, as we find in a machlekes tanaim, ad mosai abbas nizainis, until what point does she get mezainis? Ad shada'aris, until engagement. That's like Rebbe. Mishum Rebbe Lazar Amru. It was said in the name of Rabbi Lazar, ad shadibagar, until she becomes a begeris, meaning engagement is not enough. Tani Rav Yosef set forth a brisa which had the lashon adat yahavyan. So they get mezainis until yahavyan. What does yahavyan mean? Marriage or engagement. The question was, Havaya means the Erison, merely engaged. Is that enough to terminate her schus? Or Havaya Dinasoin, or actually marriage, take it, we'll leave it standing. Now, of course, we're a bit curious to figure out what the what the factors at play are. Why would Erison be considered the cutoff point? Why wouldn't it be? But the Gemara soon will go into that. Amalei Rav Chizda Rav Yosef. So he asked Rav Yosef, Mi shmielach mined Rav Yehuda. Have you ever heard from Rav Yehuda whether an arusa, an engaged girl, yesh la mezainis, does she still have mezainis, or yein la mezainis or not? Amalei, so he said, look, mishmalo shmieli. Truth is, I never heard. Ela mesvara, but if you want to think about it logically, I'll tell you, Lesla, she doesn't have a schus of mezainis. You know why? Given the ursa. You see, the whole point is to look after her needs, right? But once she gets engaged, lo nichale de titzel, her fiancé, her chassan, certainly doesn't want her to go run around and collect, for herself, right? Doesn't want her to degrade herself. Lo nichale de titzel, of course, he'll take care of her. So he's looking after her needs. There's no need for her to access her father's properties. So that's my svara. The reason why she doesn't get it is because someone's looking after her future husband. Amar Leis, Rav Chizda tells Rav Yosef, Im mishma leishmelecha. Actually, if you're telling me you haven't really heard, this halacha confirmed from Rav Yehuda that an arusa loses her mezainis, misvara isla. I would tell you just the opposite. Logic would indicate that she does have mezainis from her father. You know why? Since he's not really familiar with her, perhaps he'll discover a blemish or something wrong. He wouldn't just spend his money, irresponsibly. He wouldn't feed her until he's confirmed, until he's actually, confident that this is really his wife, which doesn't happen until marriage. So I contain that there's nobody looking after her, and therefore certainly she's entitled to her father's mezainis. That was one version of events. So we already see, the factors at play. Vikadamri, there was another version. Amarle, he responded, when the question was posed to him whether an arusa has mezainis. So Rav Yosef says, look, mishma leshmeli, I never heard the halacha, but misvara, I'll tell you, logically, I would say isla, she has her father's mezainis, because her future husband is not really caring for her at this point. He's not willing to spend money on her. Since he's not really confident and secure that this is really going to work, he wouldn't just spend his money just like that. Amar so Rav Chizda responded, well, actually, I disagree. If you haven't really heard this as a accepted halacha misvara lesla, I would contend that logic dictates that she does not have her father's mezainis. Why? Because once he engages her, he's unwilling that she degrade herself, and certainly he's looking after her and taking care of her needs. Somebody's looking after her, she doesn't need her father's mezainis. So we see the svara is going this way and that way, and perhaps these were the factors at play in the previous Gemara in terms of deciding whether an arusa is still entitled to her father's mezainis. Sivmun the Gavri Shak Zaraf Manav Yavamashni Arusa. Okay. Boy Rav Sheshes. The following question was posed to Rav Sheshes. Mimaenes. Here's an interesting shayla. So this daughter, this Yisayma, once she marries, she's certainly totally detached from her, father's estate. No mezainis. What if she's been married off as a youngster, as a katana, and now she rejected her husband, in which case she sort of, retroactively nullified the entire marriage, and she's back home? Can she have mezainis? Yesh la mezainis? Ay ein la mezainis? Amul Rav Sheshes Tani Su. We have a brisa which says Almana bebeis avia. So we're speaking that this girl got engaged, and then her chassan passes away, and she's back home. So she never really left her father's domain. She was only engaged. Engagement doesn't really detach her from her father, right? Now she's back home. Or she was divorced, a grusha bebeis avia. She's back home. V'shemeres yabam bebeis avia. She's awaiting yibum, and she's back home at this point. So again, she was just engaged. Fellow passed away without kids, right? And she's back home awaiting yibum. In all these cases, yesh la mezainis. After her father's passing, she has mezainis rights. Rabbi Yehuda Aimer, Oida, bebeis avia. So as Taisus points out, we're speaking like the Shita that holds the Arusa. An Arusa has mezainis, right? Because we're speaking that she was engaged. She still maintains mezainis rights. Okay, that's the Tanakam. Rabbi Yehuda Imer, oide bebeis avia yesh la mezainis. If she's still home, still identifying with her father's home, she has his mezainis. Eina bebeis avia, but otherwise she's not there. Ein la mezainis, there's no mezainis. Rabbi Yehuda Tanakama. Aren't Rabbi Yehuda's words simply just a formulation of the Tanakama's shita? He's not really adding anything new. When you're still at home, you get mezainis. There must be some case which they're disagreeing about. So what's the case? Mamanis. Elav mamanis. Apparently the mamanis case is the point of dispute here. So she had gotten married as a ketana, and then she rejected. She came back home. What happens now? Is she really considered back home or not? The Tanakama Sover Isla, according to Tanakama, she still gets mezainis, because the Mian sort of undoes the entire experience, and she's sort of back home as though nothing ever happened. Rabbi the Sover Lesla, he holds no. Once you're married, you're out. So apparently this is a machlekes Tanai. Here comes one more question. Boy Reish Lakish. So Reish Lakish wanted to know Bas Yevam. So when Isha's husband passed away without kids, she went over and did Yibum with the brother. Typically, the Ksuba payat upon this, second brother's divorcing her or death, comes from the first brother's property. That's just the way it is. What about Basivam? She has a daughter with the Yavam, with the second husband. Is she entitled to mezainis from her father's estate after his passing? Yesh la mezainis? Does she get that? Or yen la mezainis? Or maybe not. Why would I say not? Since we learned in Yivamis, Kesubos al nechsi bala rishon. The Ksuba pay out to the Isha herself, to the Yivam herself, comes from where? From the previous husband's assets. Which pretty much indicates that the second husband didn't really accept upon himself his own personal Ksuba obligations. Therefore, the daughter is not entitled to the mezainis from the second husband. I never really arranged a new Ksuba. It was all based on the first husband. So he's not obligated. Or perhaps you can say, Kivan, the less lamirishan. Now, obviously, we're speaking that there are no funds from the first husband's estate. Otherwise, of course, the daughter would take from there. So there are no funds coming from there, and the second husband says, "Look, it's not my business." Or perhaps we can say, Kivan the less lamirishan. Since, as we know, let's say there are no funds available from the first husband's estate. There's nothing there to take from. What would the Isha do in terms of her own personal ksuba payat if the second husband passes away? Tkina l'rabbanim yishena. Chacham said that she can get from the second husband. There's nothing available from the first husband, you get from the second husband. So perhaps that allowance, that broadening of the obligation that the second husband is meant to step into the first husband's shoes if there's nothing available from husband number one, perhaps that would be applicable to the daughter as well. The daughter is now entitled to mezainis from the second husband, which is really her father, by the way. Teiku, so we leave it standing unresolved. So, what do we learn today? We started with Kesubos benin dichron. So if she sells the Ksuba to other people, she still maintains Kesubos benin dichron rights. She didn't mean to relinquish everything. If she's moichel to her husband, she loses everything. If she sells to her husband, she still maintains. We learned that a husband is not chayiv to be kover the arusa, because the kvura is tit for tat for the ksuba, which she's not really getting at this point. Ksuba meaning the nadunya aspect. Until what point can a daughter draw for her mezainis? We're speaking after the father's death. Until either marriage or bagrus. Regarding erusin, we have machlekes. She married and then she did miyun and came back, we have a machlekes. A daughter of a yevama, we leave it as a teku. All the best to you and hatzlach rabba.